Hello.
Monday night at 10:30 on MPT. Programs on MPT are made possible by our members and the following.
We at Sage Policy Group recognize that this is a challenging period for households and businesses. But Marylanders are intelligent, strong, inventive, and entrepreneurial. Eventually, this economy will bounce back stronger than ever.
Salisbury University educates tomorrow's professionals with graduate programs to advance your career. Earn your master's online in business, nursing, or GIS. Study social work online or at Satellites in Hagerstown, Cecil, Southern Maryland, and the Midshore. Learn more at salisbury.edu.
71 acres in downtown Baltimore devoted to learning, discovery, care, and service. We train the professionals who secure the health, well-being, and just treatment of Maryland citizens. We create the knowledge that cures disease and strengthens communities across the state and around the world. UMB makes the world more just, more enlightened, healthier, and more humane. We are UMB.
This program is made by MPT to enrich the diverse communities throughout our state and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you.
Convening during COVID.
The work goes on. The work must continue.
You have to minimize risk when you can. You have to be reasonable about your approach to life right now.
Responding to violent crime.
The time for action is now.
At the end of the day, we want to solve the problem and not just massage rhetoric.
And the list of candidates for governor grows again.
I was that person. I was the person growing up who didn't check the right boxes.
For 40 years, connecting Marylanders to their government, this is State Circle.
Welcome to the 40th anniversary season of MPT's State Circle. This week, we begin our coverage of the 2022 General Assembly. Lawmakers return to Annapolis this week for an election year session. Top issues include approving a new map of House and Senate districts following the census, legalizing recreational marijuana, possibly by asking voters to make the choice, deciding what to do with a multi-billion-dollar state surplus, and new proposals to fight climate change. This will be the third legislative session affected by COVID-19. The Omicron variant has stressed Maryland hospitals. A new record was set this week, though the patient count has declined a little over the past few days. Lawmakers are trying to stay safe while at the same time getting their work done, as Nancy Amato reports.
I think everyone acknowledges that you have to minimize risk when you can. You have to be reasonable about your approach to life right now, and you have to move forward. You have to get back to work. You have to get back to school.
House Minority Leader Jason Buckle says it's disappointing to kick off another legislative session with ongoing safety concerns about COVID. But lawmakers say there is business to conduct, albeit without the pomp and circumstance.
The work goes on. The work must continue. And that's what we're here to do. Marylanders' health and our economy are the fundamental components of what we are here to do over the next 90 days.
Typically when session begins, there's a decent amount of social interaction and conversations that happen that probably really aren't happening this year on a organized basis at all. And also, I just think it's harder to focus on the substance and everything that you're doing, just like it is for most of us over the last 2 years in your regular jobs.
For now, the Senate will meet on the floor 5 days a week with some pro forma sessions where only the presiding officers and leadership from both parties are present. The House will only convene in pro forma sessions for the first few weeks to introduce bills. Senator Clarence Lamb shared that many of the protocols that were implemented last year are back in place.
That includes frequent testing, at least weekly, of members and their staff who are on site. That also includes greater physical distancing of people that are actually working on site in the General Assembly offices. That also includes restrictions on the number of visitors that we can have at any one point in time in our offices, as well as having committee hearings fully virtual for at least the first month.
The Senate is planning to return to in-person committee hearings in mid-February, unless it's deemed too dangerous. For the public and lobbyists hoping to be heard,
certainly will be another session where we have to adapt as appropriate and recognize the very real public health emergency we're in right now.
Brian Frazee is the president of the Maryland Government Relations Association, the professional organization for Maryland lobbyists. He says COVID has led to some positive changes.
We now have live streaming of floor sessions, subcommittee meetings, voting sessions, posting of the bill order in advance of committee hearings. Much of that was not available pre-pandemic. And so from that standpoint, there is more access and transparency.
Meantime, in order to address what's happening outside the State House, Governor Hogan has activated the National Guard to help respond to surging cases at hospitals and nursing homes. And Marylanders can expect more hospital-based testing sites and free N95 and KN95 masks in days to come. I'm Nancy Amata for State Circle.
New congressional districts adopted in a special session are heading for a court challenge. Now it's time for lawmakers to redraw their own districts, as Charles Robinson reports.
There are impacts on the city, but that's a product of the changing population in the city. Certainly as a city senator, that's something that we've got to find a way to turn around over the next 10 years, but the numbers are the numbers.
We're going to deliver these maps to the House and Senate clerks and try to get it done.
The process for selecting legislative maps is a little different. First, the governor gets to present his plan to the presiding officers. They, in turn, have the option of accepting the governor's plan or creating one of their own. If in 45 days they don't have an agreement, well, the governor's plan goes into effect. There are two maps, one drawn by the Maryland Citizens Redistricting Commission, appointed by the governor, and the Legislative Redistricting Advisory Commission. Driving a lot of the changes are population shifts. Additionally, a number of districts are being shrunk.
So if your house is in Timonium, I know it's not a city, but a recognizable community, you have one member of the House of Delegates who you get to call up and say, you vote for me. If you live in Annapolis, you get two. And if you live in the city of Frederick, you call three and you say, hey, you represent me. You have to do what I want. When people understand it that way, they look at them and say, well, that doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't.
A lot of people won't be happy. There is no way to have something that constitutionally is required to be done every 10 years, and which is always going to have to adjust to where population changes are, or where they have increased, where they have decreased, to have things that are contiguous together in one district.
The case for independent commissions, I think, boils down to the fact that you can't really entrust line drawing to people whose direct interest is at stake.
I feel very confident about the map that the Legislative Redistricting Advisory Commission recommended. It is a fair map. It has the lowest population variance between districts than any in recent memory. It reflects the diversity of the state and the population trends and changes.
There is never a perfect map. Unlike the congressional map, there will be no veto from the governor. You can anticipate a challenge in the courts. In Annapolis, I'm Charles Robinson for State Circle.
Governor Hogan this week proposed using the multi-billion-dollar state surplus for tax relief. His plan would make permanent the enhanced earned income tax credit for lower income workers and would shield some retirement income from taxes. Meantime, the governor rolled out a crime package, as Sue Copen tells us.
There is nothing more important than addressing the violent crime crisis in our state.
Governor Hogan says with violent crime and homicides surging here and in major cities across the country, more needs to be done to provide law enforcement with the tools they need to battle the problem.
Today, I'm announcing that we are expanding our Refund the Police initiative to a 3-year, $500 million investment in increased support for our police and for increased crime control and victim protection services all across the state of Maryland.
The governor's plan includes $137 million for state police aid to local jurisdictions, $220 million for salary increases and bonuses to help with the recruitment and retention of police officers, $50 million in capital improvements for state police barracks around the state, and a new tactical services building for the Special Operations Division, $30 million for neighborhood safety grants, $37 million to fully fund victim services providers, and money for a 100% state-funded match for all Crime Stoppers rewards. The governor's also asking lawmakers to approve legislation creating the Judicial Transparency Act of 2022. It calls for tracking and publishing information on sentences for all violent crimes. Senate President Bill Ferguson says they'll be taking a close look at that one.
I do not believe that mandatory minimum sentences have a evidence base of reducing crime. If somebody is going to commit a violent act, they're not looking at the statute book to determine whether or not they're going to do it. What may determine whether they do it is if they think they're going to have a swift and certain consequence.
Baltimore City House Delegation Chair Delegate Stephanie Smith says one of the biggest needs is not addressed in the governor's package: staffing in the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services.
And when you have vacancies of upwards of 1,500 persistently across the ranks of these public safety roles, and then know that we need even additional staff beyond those that are currently vacant, I just find it interesting that he uses a frame, refund the police, when there's been no defunding of the police, but there has been a very deliberate defunding of the public safety apparatus of the state.
Smith says Baltimore lawmakers welcome the opportunity to be a partner in finding solutions, but
at the end of the day, we want to solve the problem and not just massage rhetoric.
As for the governor,
there can be no more excuses and no more delays. The time for action is now.
In Annapolis, Sue Copen for State Circle.
Our newsmaker this week is the newest Democratic candidate for governor, former Anne Arundel County Executive Laura Newman. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here today.
You're entering a crowded field for the Democratic primary. You have a lot of candidates who've been out campaigning for many months. You see an opening.
Well, I think up until now, the voters probably haven't really been paying attention to the race. I mean, we're all busy. We're dealing with a lot of challenges at the moment in our communities. And, the primary is June 28th, and I think now is just the right time to get in.
It's only a group of men running for the Democratic nomination. The office of governor has only ever been held by men. But of course, slightly over half of the voters are women. Is that central to your strategy?
Look, a lot of those men I've known for a long time and would consider them friends. And, I certainly appreciate that there are currently 8 men in the race. I am in this race because I bring the qualifications and the experience, both personally and professionally, to make a difference in Maryland. I am the only candidate born, raised, and educated in Maryland. And really, I bring public and private sector experience to the race. I've had a great career in the private sector. I built a company, venture capital backed. I understand how to create jobs and make payroll, but I've also had the honor of holding public office, and I know how to walk the halls of Annapolis, and I know how work gets done in Annapolis. So I do believe that combination of experience is exactly what Maryland needs right now.
You started your campaign this week by posting a powerful video talking about a really rough start in life, an abusive parent. As soon as you were able to move out, you did. You were attacked, raped at gunpoint. You mentioned in the Facebook post, the first sentence was, "I know what it's like to be denied justice and to feel invisible when asking for help." As governor, what could you do to help somebody in a similar circumstance?
Well, I have seen the very best and the very worst of what Maryland has to offer. And, the reason I shared my personal story is because so many of us have had our own journeys, and it's been challenging for many in our community. And I want everyone to know who I am as a person, in addition to the qualifications that I bring. And I think as governor, it is important to talk about, your credentials and how experienced you are to do the job, but we also need to connect with people on a very personal level. People are struggling in our community. And in fact, it was going back to my childhood home that really motivated me to consider this race. I didn't plan to run. I'm very happy in my life and in my career at this point. And I didn't really have this plan, as you can tell, because I just launched on Monday, and we're moving into this race. But the truth is, I couldn't stay away. And the reason I couldn't stay away is because, I was asked to go back to my childhood home off of Orleans Street in Baltimore City. And I was being interviewed for a documentary on sexual assault because I've been an outspoken advocate. And while I was there, I met the boy who lives in my childhood home. And as I talked to him, he's the same age I was when I lived there. And the truth is, what is his potential outcome? Our school system is failing him. His healthcare outcome is not great. His public safety outcome is not great. And what I realized is that in the decades between the time I lived there and now while he lives there, not enough has changed to help this child succeed. And that's the day actually I decided I wanted to get involved again.
How would your policy prescriptions for helping that young man and other people succeed differ from what your opponents are talking about?
Well, there needs to be a combination of creating a strong economy in Maryland and understanding how to connect people in the community who have potential, who we've never seen potential in before, and connecting them with employers who are trying desperately to hire. So, look, I was that person. I was the person growing up who didn't check the right boxes. I didn't go to the right schools. I didn't finish high school. I didn't go to college. And, I felt on the outside, but I also believed that I was capable of so much more than what people saw in me. And that is really central to why this matters so much. We need to see the potential in everyone in our community. And it is the role of government to help tap into that potential. And when we tap into that potential by providing a path to opportunity for everyone in our community, we are ultimately seeing the potential in Maryland.
You talked about public safety in the context of the young man on Orleans Street. Baltimore City, again, over 300 homicides, I think the 7th year in a row, 6th year perhaps last year. Baltimore County saw record homicides. Governor Hogan is pushing a bill for tighter sentences, tougher sentences for gun offenses. There may be a split opinion in the legislature on this. As governor, what would you want to do?
Well, for me personally, the criminal justice system failed me. So I've seen it up close and personal. I will say, having grown up in Baltimore City, I'm the only candidate born, raised, and educated in Baltimore City, and I know it well. What's different between the time when I lived there and today is illegal guns. So unless we really address the issue of illegal guns on our streets, I'm not sure that we're going to see a reduction in crime. But this is not just about homicides in Baltimore City. It's about.
Let me stop you on the guns. What would you do about guns?
Well, we certainly need to address the illegal guns on the streets. I mean, I know the police department is well aware of this and they are trying to make progress on it, but we need to be stricter in following up and convicting. And by the way, longer sentences for people who are using illegal guns to commit crimes. I do support that. And I believe that until we really take a holistic approach to the criminal justice system, we're not going to change this. We have to think about it beyond just one particular slice of the issue and put it all together in the conversation.
On education, Baltimore City and elsewhere, I think it's been sort of the silent crisis of the pandemic. Kids were in virtual school for a year or so, and virtual school was better than nothing, but it wasn't as good as real school. Do we need to be doing something right now, not years in the future, to help these kids catch up?
I am so glad that you brought that up, because I fundamentally at my core believe that the major civil rights issue of our time in education is access online. If we are asking students now for almost 2 years to occasionally or full time learn remotely, every single child needs to have access on the internet and be able to get into their schoolwork. I mean, the numbers are staggering on the kids who have not either shown up remotely because they don't have access or are not back in the classroom. And so, look, at the end of the day, I have access to the internet. That's where I get information. That's how we're talking here today. How can we expect our students in Baltimore City to succeed if we don't make sure that they are connected to their educators? And by the way, that's across the state. It happens to be particularly glaring in Baltimore City.
When you were county executive in Anne Arundel County, you were a Republican, which is something I imagine your Democratic opponents in this primary may mention from time to time. What's your answer going to be?
Well, I was raised a Democrat in Baltimore City. My parents were involved in politics in Baltimore City when I was a child. My experience in that was not favorable. My mother was involved in corruption with Baltimore City politics, and that is its own story and experience. But I dealt with a lot of trauma growing up, and it was all of it, as you saw in the video, and some of the decisions my parents made. And I wanted to turn my back on that. So when I left, I wanted to turn my back on everything I had known. And it wasn't about ideology. It was about wanting a different life for myself. And as I held office as a Republican, I realized that some of the social issues just did not align with my values. I am still fiscally responsible, and I consider myself socially responsible. I think you should be able to love who you love and marry who you love, and women should ultimately be able to decide for themselves what's best for them.
Our thanks to Laura Newman. All of our candidate interviews can be found online at mpt.org/askthecandidates. For the Political Roundtable this week, MPT's Charles Robinson is joined by Aaron Cox of the Washington Post. Good to see you both. Aaron, especially good to have you back on MPT.
I am so thrilled to be able to be here.
Let's talk about, we're delighted to have you. Let's talk about some insider politics stuff. We got some early numbers this week on the campaign finance reports that are going to come out in full next week on how the candidates for governor did with fundraising. Aaron, what were the big takeaways for you?
So we have 10 Democrats running, and we have numbers from about half. But the conclusions you can draw from what we know so far is that this isn't so far going to be a very high dollar race, and that we've got Wes Moore, the author and former nonprofit leader, pretty far out ahead, raising a lot more than any first-time candidate I've seen in my years covering Maryland politics. He banked nearly $5 million and has roughly 3.1 to spend between now and the primary in June. And one of the things that is also interesting is that 3 of the top 4 people with money, these are the people who are going to be able to compete, who are going to be able to get their messages out to voters, who are going to have the resources to be able to really launch a strong campaign. 3 of the 4 candidates who have enough money to really make a difference here are men of color, which is a new thing for a Maryland gubernatorial race too. Coming in second place, we have Tom Perez, the former DNC chair, and in third place, we have John King, the former education secretary under President Obama. And we also have Peter Francho, the former comptroller. He didn't release how much money he raised, but he did tell everybody how much he had in the bank, which was $3.3 million, and the most of any candidate who's given out any information about what they have so far.
And Charles, of course, it's good to have money in your campaign treasury, but dollars are not the same thing as votes, but better to have it than not.
Absolutely. I think the most curious thing for me is, as I keep continuing to watch the State Board of Elections, I note that none of these individuals have actually filed the paperwork to actually say they're running. Now, there have been some on the Republican side who have done this. But the other part is, you're right. No one can count votes yet. This is that early process, if you will, where people begin to say, as we like to say, we get the pretenders from the for real people. And if you got money in the bank, we know you're for real at this point. And then, of course, you got to do a campaign, because the fundraising process changes the moment you announce and fill out the paperwork.
And we'll learn a lot more next week about the Republicans who are running for governor, the people running for comptroller and attorney general. Charles, you reported this week on the legislative redistricting process, which is different from the congressional redistricting process. What are the big takeaways from that?
Well, first and foremost, I think no one will be surprised. The Republicans are against whatever this map is. And it was the same case when we were doing the congressional maps. What I find very curious is that, the Governor's Commission, which put together a map, they are stymied continuously by this whole idea that the legislative body is not paying any attention to their maps. The last part of that is this: unlike in the congressional maps, where the governor had a veto, he has no veto. Once again, you got to wait 45 days. If you don't have a map, then his map goes in. I can almost guarantee you that whatever the legislature comes up with is going to pass.
And the legislature has a plan. They had their own commission. And as long as there's no filibuster in the Senate, meaning that the Democratic map needs to keep almost all of the senators happy, Aaron, it's almost guaranteed, as Charles said, of becoming law.
Exactly. And, you know, the power of incumbency is very, very strong. The maps that the legislators are looking at start with their own districts that they already have, and then kind of adjust the boundaries here and there to account for population shifts. So you're asking people to vote on maps that more or less preserve the districts that got them elected in the first place. And it's kind of hard to see the calculus where they make a different choice.
We saw new poll numbers this week. Governor Hogan's approval number remains up in the stratosphere. He's getting phone calls and all sorts of invitations from Republican heavyweights in Washington who would like to see him. He's term limited as governor, of course, but they want to see him run for the Senate. Why is that, Aaron?
Well, in the same way that Democrats have Joe Manchin as kind of a pivotal point of control in the Democratic Senate, Democratic-controlled Senate, Republicans would like to figure out how to gain at least one or two more seats so that they can be able to control the agenda and control what's happening in Washington. And, you know, for people outside Maryland, it seems like a little bit of a no-brainer. You have a term-limited governor who's very popular in a blue state that, you know, it seems pretty obvious from the outside that it would be a smart political step for Hogan to run for Senate. But a lot of people inside Maryland kind of look at the same set of facts and say, maybe it doesn't make that much sense. I mean, you have somebody who is exceptionally popular, in part because he kind of acts as a buffer and a check against the Democratic legislature. Maryland voters who, you know, picked Joe Biden by an exceptionally large margin, picking a senator who would, you know, help Mitch McConnell take power in the U.S. Senate, that's a much different calculation for voters.
And we're talking about the seat held by Senator Chris Van Hollen. Senator Ben Cardin would be up 2 years from now. And Charles, there's no indication that Larry Hogan wants to be in the Senate, is there?
No, in fact, it's kind of one of these will he or won't he when it comes to maybe him making a presidential run. And understand, he's raising a lot of money outside of the state through his PAC. And what I find very curious is, you know, at his last inauguration, he was urged by one of the Bushes to consider a run for president. And he continues to get a number of individuals from around the country to say, why don't you think about a run? But, you know, we got the big kahuna, Donald Trump.
Charles, we're going to have to leave it there. Charles and Aaron, thank you very much. You can read Aaron's reports at WashingtonPost.com. And that is State Circle for this week. Thank you for watching and have a good night.
Programs on MPT are made possible by our members and the following.
71 acres in downtown Baltimore devoted to learning, discovery, care, and service. We train the professionals who secure the health, well-being, and just treatment of Maryland citizens. We create the knowledge that cures disease and strengthens communities across the state and around the world. UMB makes the world more just, more enlightened, healthier, and more humane. We are UMB.
University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, leading the way on Chesapeake Bay restoration, while guiding our state, nation, and world toward a more sustainable future.
Claim your future through UMBC's new graduate programs in software engineering. Providing modern approaches to software development and implementation, UMBC's faculty is ready to help connect you to resources and opportunities in this in-demand field.
That'd be Detective Superintendent Gibson.
Yes, ma'am.
And that would be me.
I've been brought in from the Metropolitan Police to lead a review into the